My mother beat up a gang for me. What are your heroic great mom or dad stories? My dad is still pretty bad but this is one of my favorite moments of being around him. One day my sister and I were outside playing, and he was gardening. I was probably 5 at the time, so a lot of the details are hazy to me. My sister remembers it much better and tells the story a lot. While we were all outside, one of the neighbor kids ran up and was screaming about his grandma collapsing. My dad is a dentist, but I guess that is close enough in a medical emergency, so he ran to go help. Apparently his grandmother had a heart attack and her heart had stopped. My dad started performing CPR. Another neighbor called 911. It took half an hour for an ambulance to get there. My dad performed CPR on the lady for half an hour. She ended up making it. The local newspaper did a write-up about him as a local hero because of it. TLDR, my dad performed CPR on a woman for half an hour to keep her alive. Grew up with an abusive mother, but my dad stayed with her until my brother and I were both old enough to be on our own. I thought that he was just too pee-whipped to leave, so I asked him why. I found out that most families who are in the military, my dad, go through a divorce. The one not in the service, my mom, gets the kids. I wasn't going to leave you alone with her. Bro dad. My dad. He's an amazing man in so many more ways than this, and he is now, happily, divorced and dating a very wonderful woman who treats him like a king. My bro and I owe him everything. Also, when I was about 3, my dad had put me in my car seat on the passenger's side and was going around to the driver's side to get in when a guy ran up, opened the back door, and tried to grab me. My dad is a big guy, about 6 feet 5 inches, so he runs around and pushes the guy away. Guy pulls a knife, stabs him in the forehead. My dad then proceeded to throw him through a nearby wall. Granted, it was a shoddily constructed brick wall, but the would-be kidnapper broke his arm going through it. Police were called. Kidnapper was arrested. Sadly, I don't remember any of it. And then your father, Wolverine, regenerated the brain tissue from being stabbed in the head. My mom is pretty freaking awesome. When my siblings and I were young, if we ever got seriously injured, she was always calm like still water. When you're 7 and you break a bone, it's a big freaking deal to you. And when your parent is calm and comforting, it makes it a lot less scary. The best one, though, doesn't even involve one of her biological children. My parents got divorced when I was 8, and me and my other 2 siblings were visiting my mom at her apartment. The complex had a pool, and the day was nice. We were sitting out on the front patio, overlooking the pool, thinking about going swimming. All of a sudden, this woman down by the pool starts screaming bloody murder. It's muddled at first, and then we heard her screaming clearly my baby. So my mom jumps up, sprints down the stairs, and into the pool area, dives into the deep end, where there is a clearly a unmoving tiny body, and comes up to the surface with it, gently cradling the infant. She hops up over the wall one-armed, and proceeds to give it CPR while another person is calling 911. Ambulance arrives. Baby is rushed to the hospital, where it survives. The baby's mother didn't know how to swim, and refused to jump in after her child, which was less than a year old, in one of those stupid inflatable rings that's strapped on over the shoulders, instead of the safer version, which straps through the legs. The baby just slipped right out of it, and the mother didn't even notice until the baby had been underwater for almost a full minute. TLDR. My mother saved a baby with a stupid mother from drowning, and refused to jump in after her child. To be fair, drowning yourself isn't going to help your drowning child, and having a second thrashing body in the water isn't going to help others' rescue efforts. I wouldn't hold not jumping in against her taking her child to the pool in the first place if she couldn't keep him safe. Absolutely. My dad was a women's volleyball coach at high school college level after he graduated from college. So this is taking place in the mid-late 1970s. On his team there was a black girl, and at this particular match she was the only black girl on either team. During this match the fans in the gym started yelling out derogatory racial slurs. My dad as the coach goes to the umpire and says, "You have to do something about these fans." The umpire says he cannot really pinpoint which fans are the ones yelling the racial slurs. So, like a boss, my dad tells the umpire, "You have to get every last fan out of here." And so, they empty the gym and the match is finished with no one in the gym except for players and coaches. TLDR. My dad stands up to racism and empties a gym, like a boss. You're out of order. This whole gym's out of order. Your dad is a boss. My dad pushed 1,300 pounds of drywall off of my mom, thinking my little brother was trapped under it too. We were building our house, and the drywallers had leaned the drywall against a wall at too sharp an angle. It was at the top of the stairway. My mom was tiling the hallway next to the drywall. All of a sudden it fell, and as it fell my mom pushed my 2-year-old brother into the hall closet away from danger. He began screaming. My dad, who was in the basement, came rushing up the stairs, shoved the mass of drywall off my mom, and saved her arm. Her arm was pinned between the drywall and a half wall next to the stairwell. My dad suffered a pretty severe tear in his groin and my mom's arm looked like a pancake, but little brother was perfectly fine. Oh frick, torn groin is fricking horrid. My mother and abusive stepdad were having another argument. I was about 7 at the time. He snatched her purse out of her hand and was circling our car, old Mercury Grand Marquis Heritage boat, to put the car between him and her. I, always on her side, ran up behind him and snagged the purse. He spun around and backhanded me in the face. As I turned my head back to look at him, Mom had one hand on the hood of the car, both legs sweeping over it, stuck the landing after jumping over this enormous vehicle, and in one fluid motion hooked him right in the jaw. He hit the ground like a brick and didn't get up for quite a while. Meanwhile, Mom is screaming at him, threatening him never to touch me again. TLDR. My mom is Rocky freaking Balboa. My big brother was outside playing in a forest with a big group of kids, all around 10-11 years old. My brother was quite short and shy and wouldn't hurt a fly. For some reason an older and much taller girl started bullying him this evening and pushed him into some bushes. My brother hurt his eye and came home crying, embarrassed and upset about the whole thing. Now, my father was a medical officer in the army and spent years perfecting his skills in creating war wounds with makeup for different field exercises for his men. So you could always count on him for having a few bags of fake blood at home. So, my father decides to play this bully a bit of a prank. He goes all out with the makeup and even uses some sort of rubber eyeball with silicone skin to make it look like my brother's eyes dangling from its socket. He then sprays my brother's sweater with blood and sends him out into the forest again. It doesn't take long before you can hear everyone scream their faces off out there in the woods and then roaring laughter and applauds. My brother was the hero for the evening and the tall girl never bullied him again. TLDR. Father decides to scare the crap out some kids. My parents had been divorced for 17 years, and my father was diagnosed with ALS. Despite everything in their lives, my mother said to my reformed alcoholic, frequently a jackass father, "You will not die alone. You will move back in with me, and you will live here. I will take care of you." Very little was as distasteful to my mother as dealing with sick people, but she cared for dad for the 2 years he had left, including all of the personal things that were needed once his muscles had gone completely and all he could lift was his head. She grieved every time she didn't do something exactly right. Despite no training of any sort, she made sure that he did not need to be checked into an institution, nor handled by impersonal hands, nor face his death alone. She did this all while holding down a full-time job as a journalist. That he faced the end with dignity and courage was at least as much her doing as it was his. When my father was my age, he had 3 months to live. In the end, both of my parents were heroes. I've enjoyed all the physically brave stories, but your mother's heroism is really on the next level. It shows incredible compassion. Many people couldn't handle the level of care required to take care of a completely paralyzed patient. She could easily have used the divorce as her excuse to let him die alone. Few would condemn her for that. I salute her. My story is about my granddad. I remember it clearly even though I was only 5 years old. I was staying at my grandparents' house and in the morning my grandma had come in my room to tell me she was making a surprise treat for my breakfast. As she went downstairs to make it, I heard her yelp and scream as she opened the kitchen door. I presumed that she'd burnt her finger or something while making breakfast and decided to wait upstairs so I didn't ruin the surprise she was making. It was then that I felt the heat. It was hotter than anything you could imagine. I saw thick clouds of smoke heading up the stairs and immediately realized that almost the whole of the downstairs of the house was on fire. This was a tiny house and it spread fast. I hid under my bed like many kids would. I figured I'd stay there until it was over. I waited and waited, getting hotter and hotter and increasingly scared. I heard fire trucks pull up. I heard yelling and strangers' voices. I heard everyone leave the house. Nobody was coming back for me. I was crying a lot at this point. Next thing I remember is being dragged out from under the bed by my legs and lifted into my granddad's arms. He wrapped me tightly on his jacket and held me to his chest, hiding my face. He ran all the way downstairs with me, right past the fires, and out the front door. He placed me straight into a fire truck and continued helping my grandma with her breathing. It was to this day the most heroic thing I have experienced. My granddad, an old man, literally ran back into the upstairs of a burning building to get me out. I still respect my granddad more than anyone else in the world after his actions that day. Gave me chills. Your granddad is a bad butt. I was a kid, playing in the yard with my cousin in the parking lot next to the house. A guy was loading things into his trunk with his big black dog sitting beside him. The big black dog starts sprinting toward us, unprovoked, just barking his face off like a terrifying monster. My cousin and I scream and start running. This thing was almost our size and barreling toward us like a truck. The dog, of course, gives chase. I tripped and fell. I look up to see my dad vaulting out of the door, at least a foot in the air, flying over the steps leading to the sidewalk. He grabs the dog and wrenches it away from my cousin's heels, after dragging it back to his owner, who, if I recall, acted like we were in the wrong for running away. He comes to us and sets us down on the couch and instructs my grandmother to make us sundaes. Also, my mom saved me, my little brother, and my grandmother from being washed out into the ocean by the undertow. We almost drowned. I have this amazing image of sitting on the beach with my brother as she swam like mad out to rescue my Gma. TLDR. My dad and mom are super strong and super great. It wasn't for me, but when my brother is autistic and back when he was in middle school, a teacher's aide actually threw him to the ground and put his hands behind his back and pinned him down like a cop arresting someone, because he was crying and refusing to dress out for pay, and the aide felt this was the appropriate response. Now mind you, my brother had gone there for 3+ years. He was never violent, but he happened to be a big kid, and by big I mean tall. He to this day has barely any muscle strength. So my mom found out about this, and how the school treated it in a very blah manner, and went to the campus and ripped the teacher and the principal a new butthole. They continued to brush it off until she threatened to go to the media, and only then did they fire the aide and apologize. Fast forward to winter break. My grandfather and I had gone to pick my brother up on the last day of school, and a different teacher's aide said, "Oh, we're so sorry to hear he won't be coming back next semester." Now this greatly confused my grandfather and I, as we had not heard of this at all. She had this "oh crap" look on her face, obviously realizing we hadn't been told. The school had disenrolled my brother without telling my parents because he was too much of a handful for them. This is the only public school with a special needs program in the district, so there weren't really a lot of options. Still, the main fact being was they said nothing to my parents. My mom was so livid when she found out. I was with her when she was calling the school districts demanding an explanation for what was going on. I thought a blood vessel was going to burst, and I was too terrified to say anything to her at all. The rest I was not present for, but I know that my brother went back to that school the next semester and there was a bit of a staff change up, and we never had issues with that school or any school ever again. TLDR. School fricked with my special needs brother. My mother ripped them apart. When my brother was in the 6th grade, he was being beaten up by the neighbor's kid whenever they got off the bus. The stop was just down the road from our house, and the foot of our driveway had a lot of trees where someone could hide. My mother decided she had enough of the kid, so she waited down near the trees with the family dog, a young female boxer. My mother waited until the bus drove off and the kid started picking on my brother to let the dog off her leash. Reese was a sweet dog, protective of the family, and when she saw my brother being hit, she took off straight for the bully, barreled into him and knocked him down, then stood on his chest and growled. My mother walked over, looked the kid in the eye and said, "If you ever touch my son again, I'll let my dog rip your throat out." The kid never went near my brother again. My father was an awesome man. I'll get out of the way now that he battled cancer and resulting strokes for 8 years. Definitely my inspiration and I miss him dearly. Debbie Downery aside, he had one badass moment that scared the crap out of me. I was probably about 8 or 9 when we were driving uphill on a snowy Connecticut road. Driving slowly was to be expected, but apparently the gentleman behind us decided that was not how things go in their hood. The idiots decide to rear-end us. Not very hard, mind you, but enough for my dad to say, "Oh heck number." Now, at least at the time, it was not law that you had to have a license plate in the front of your vehicle. My father decided to get out of the car and chase after the men who were now backing away in fear. They tried desperately to hide their plates. He chased a truck, on foot, through the snow for miles, and he got that fricking license plate number. I never knew Liam Neeson had any progeny. We were on vacation in Florida when my brother and I decided to play tag close to a small pond. Unbeknownst to us, there was an alligator, crocodile, in the pond. My dad saw as it started to look around at my brother and I running closer to the pond, and he took off after us. He snatched us both up, threw us behind him and told us to run while he grabbed oranges from a tree by the pond and started pelting the alligator in the face. Alligator backed off immediately and Dad sat us down, when we were far away from the pond, to talk about not running off by ourselves. It was pretty bad, but TLDR, Dad pelted an alligator with oranges so it wouldn't eat my brother and I. When my brother was 5-ish years old, he did a bunch of extra work because he was small for his age, so he could play a well-behaved younger kid. He had a background role in one of the Rocky sequels, filming a scene in SoCal in the summer that was supposed to take place in Philly or the like in winter. So there's a bunch of kids playing in this park wearing parkas in 90+ degree weather, and no breaks or even water for them, and they're getting overheated and dehydrated. So my mom finds Stallone and scolds him until he gets water and shade tents brought out for them. While I was on holiday in Portugal about 9 years ago, my friend and I arrived at the scene of a pretty nasty car crash. A people carrier with a dad and his 2 young boys, one about 6-7, the other 8-9. It had overturned and the dad had fallen out of the window as it was turning and was now trapped under the car. The kids were okay, but the dad had a broken leg, looked a nasty angle, and was having trouble breathing because of the weight of the car on him. There were 2 Portuguese police were at the scene but unfortunately didn't speak great English and didn't understand that he couldn't breathe. The family was English as I am, so my friend and I started trying to lift the people carrier off him, and soon the cops understood what we were doing and started to assist. Now this thing was bloody heavy and we could barely lift it. I was panicking that we would have to put it down again on him and couldn't think what to do under the pressure of the moment. Now here is the amazing bit of the story. The 2 young boys, terrified and shaken from the crash, both rushed off and picked up rocks from the side of the road that looked far too big for them to handle and started dragging and carrying them to put under the car. Neither my friend or I can remember telling them to do this. They just did it on their own to save their dad. And it worked. When we let the car down, it rested on the rocks and the policeman dragged the guy out from under the car. I was so impressed with those brave little boys. They very probably saved their dad's life. TLDR. 2 brave little boys helped save their dad in a car crash. Most certainly helped save his life. This is probably my earliest memory from when I was about 2 years old. My mother had just given birth to my younger sister about 2 months prior, and my grandmother was visiting us from the home country, Morocco. All of a sudden, I hear my mother and grandmother shrieking from my living room and run over. That side of my family is not known for their calm demeanor, by any means. I see my dad, holding my little sister upside down by her ankles. Her face was blue, and she was quite clearly not breathing. My father had this stone cold look on his face, and he was gently tapping her on her back. Soon, my sister begins coughing and throws up milk and starts breathing again, and the ambulance came soon after. I asked him later how he knew to turn her upside down to get her to stop choking, and he said he didn't. It was just instinctual. Thanks to my dad's quick thinking under pressure, he had saved her life. Sissy is still around. My parents claim my brother spent half of his early years upside down. He ate everything. Spare change, ornamental plant leaves. It was really bad when he was in a walker. We have joked since, he's 20, that he probably still has a few dollars rattling around. My dad could have been arrested for attempted abduction. I was about 7. We were living in New Brunswick at the time. Mum was disabled, cerebral palsy, and dad pretty much was home to care for her full time. We didn't have much money ever, which is why we cherished the things we did have. For me, it was my bicycle, a banana-seated big U-shaped handlebar machine of pure awesomeness. Used, of course. So there I am, riding along my neighborhood when 2 boys maybe a year or 2 older came up to me and stood in front and behind me so I couldn't ride away. They convinced me to let them try my bike, and then laughed as they raced off on it. I seem to recall having my face pushed into a mound of fresh dirt as part of their argument in favor of allowing them to borrow it. So I walked home in tears and told dad what happened, and he just went frickin' nuts. He jumped into the 1977 Dodge Aspen, put me in the front seat, and set off in search of the thieves. He found them, still riding my bike, in a pizza joint's parking lot fairly close to where they took it, and he came skidding into the lot, grabbed both of them, and tried to put them into the back seat of the car. I guess he was going to bring them to their parents to tell them what they had done. He got one boy in, who was hysterically sobbing now as he looked at me in the front seat, and the other one escaped. Dad put the bike in the trunk, and then must have settled down enough to realize the implications of what he was doing, and release the first boy with a warning to never go near me or my stuff again. All day we sat at home, waiting for the cops to show up, but they never did. I can tell you this much though, I bet those boys never tried to steal someone's bike again. So yeah, my dad was a little on the disturbed side. So yeah, my dad was a little on the bad butt side. TLDR. Dad pulled a woman out of a burning building and saved her dogs too. Surprised I haven't seen any burning building stories yet. Here's mine. We, for whatever reason, were going up to spend the weekend in Macon, and the Friday we were leaving I'd played hooky from school so we could leave in the morning. As we're in the house packing up and whatnot, we hear this awful racket from outside. People are freaking the frick out. So we go out and the house across the street is on fire. That crap was made of fat lighter, like most houses on the street, and it was practically evaporating. We knew the woman who lived there and knew she had 2 little boys, and since I was home, in the panic dad momentarily forgot that school was actually in and I was just home. I didn't actually see him go into the house, but mom did, and from what I've been told he went in twice. Once through the front, which is when he lost the jacket he was wearing, caught on fire, replaced at Christmas, and the second time he used this massive old Maglite flashlight to break the side window and drag the woman out. She told him that her kids were at school and sometime during that he let her dogs out of the backyard pen they were in. Fire department arrived half an hour later to shrug and say the house was lost. Dad went on to get in the paper and win Correctional Officer of the Quarter and some kind of award from the governor. Used to be able to find the newspaper picture on Google Images. Maglite flashlights are bad, but they are so much more practical than just a flashlight. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.